It's the inaugural record release from Discograffiti. Metal Machine Muzak is a slanted tribute to Lou Reed's divisive 1975 double LP Metal Machine Music. Lester Bangs called it the greatest album ever made, but no matter how it hits you, it's always been the ultimate music freak secret handshake. My ambient reimagining features 4 16-minute, 1-second tracks, just like the original, and each one was created by a top-shelf indie rock visionary. Lou Barlow from Dinosaur Jr. and Sebadoh, Corey Hansen from Wand, W. Cullen Hart from the Olivia Tremor Control, and Mark Robinson from Unrest. That's right, not a slouch in the bunch, unlike 99% of the compilations you've ever begrudgingly purchased for the one and only band on it you just had to hear. Metal Machine Muzak will not be available on streaming. The digital version is finally available for purchase, and the vinyl will be shipped this summer. Pre-orders for the LPs are available now, but they're going fast. They're being produced in a very limited edition run of 300 numbered 180-gram metallic silver double LP gatefold copies, only 100 of which can be ordered online. These copies will be numbered from 1 to 100, and they're first come, first served. To order either the digital or the vinyl, just head over to patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Don't miss out on Metal Machine Muzak, the ambient experience designed to make Brian Eno run screaming. What then was the most difficult thing? Was it wrapping your heart and mind around the fact that you couldn't go anywhere without being recognized? Or was it several years later when you realized I'm at a whole different point in my career and again, I can't get a contract and I have to,
Yeah.
What was harder?
You know, I don't get worried anymore. I go, this is taking me on this new route, and it's going to be great, and just not going through the agonizing and the trauma of woe is me, trying to snap out of that really quickly and go, no, this is just great. I know I'm going to look back on this and go, this was a brilliant thing to happen.
Welcome to Discograffiti, the Music Obsessives podcast that gives freaks like you and me the chance to connect with the brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebroe, and with 4 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Howard Jones, Psst, along with our special guest, the man himself, Howard Jones. Here's just some of the many things Howard and I touch on in this podcast. Rare details on Howard's very first band, the 1971 prog outfit Warrior, why the manager who broke him internationally initially turned him down before changing his mind, and the ways in which Howard was able to stay grounded when an explosion of superstardom followed over a decade of obscurity. If you're a Howard Jones superfan like me, you'll want to turn this free version off right now and opt for the director's cut of this episode on our Patreon page, which features an in-depth, half-hour-long, track-by-track discussion of his masterful debut, Humans Lib. And you can find it in our Patreon shop for mere pennies at patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Or better yet, just subscribe for access to the complete versions of all our shows. I recommend the Lieutenant tier at the very least, so you can access those director's cuts, but the major tier is what you want, if you want it all, including for you true music lovers out there, a guest-packed cornucopia of off-the-beaten-path episodes, and the more obscure the better. Even if you're on the fence, just head over there, because it's finally free to become a basic member. Coming up, we've got a career-spanning interview with the Beatles' Pete Best, an interview with the Righteous Brothers' Bill Medley, Jenny Toomey on Tsunami's discography, the Byrds' Gene Parsons, and a massive, many-guested launch into the Beach Boys' entire catalog. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and subscribe. And away we go then! Today's guest is a musician, singer, and songwriter. Between 1983 and 1986, he had 10 top 40 hit singles in the UK, 6 of which reached the top 10, including Like to Get to Know You Well, What Is Love, New Song, and Things Can Only Get Better. His 1984 album Humans Lib reached number 1 on the UK albums chart, and by the following year, he was one of the most ubiquitous musicians on the planet, actually one of the most ubiquitous human beings on the planet. Simply put, he's one of the defining figures of mid-80s synth pop. He's sold upwards of 10 million albums, and several of those are due to me and the money which had then found a home tucked deep within my preteen Velcro wallet. Lads and ladies out there in the Aquanet hairdo hangouts of 80s excellence, won't you please welcome a man whose excitement at being invited to Live Aid was presumably primarily based on the notion that he'd somehow be able to slip an Alan Watts Mickey into the mix on a global scale. It's the one and only Howard Jones.
Hi, Dave.
I do have to say, just straight off the bat, that you playing hide and seek, and that was the one tune that you did play at Live Aid, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
That could be my favorite decision you've ever made as a musician/performer.
Well, I wanted to pick the most appropriate song for the occasion, because I really wanted to be part of what Geldof and Midge were doing, and, I could have done, the songs that have been, much bigger hits than that. But I thought that was the song to play for that occasion, because it's a song about hope. And I thought that was very fitting for the time and for Live Aid.
Yeah. I mean, you had a moment and you decided to treat that moment with reverence and not just with, how do I climb on to the next rung, which, frankly, given the past that you had endured, you certainly could have gone in that direction. But what I kept coming back to in my research is that it seems like, based on everything I've taken in, that you're truly a person of substance, and that truly does govern your career more than the other way around.
Well, thank you for saying that. I've always tried to stick to my original agenda, which was to make music that would be of use to people in their lives, and to write lyrics that would be encouraging and, made you think, and maybe gave a few hints about how to live a great life. And that's always been my driving force. I mean, it was a bit of a shock becoming so well known, because it was always about the music to me, but then I had to adapt to that. So it was a byproduct of that agenda, really, of really wanting to say something of meaning, because I loved artists that did that for me, and encouraged me and made me think and moved me forward as a person. So, that was always the motivation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm so inspired by your lyrics that I had 100 man-woman orgy as a result of listening to your albums over and over again. Because of the title track of you.
Right. Yeah, I know. Humans Live. Very good.
But your work is inspiring even more so in what you did than in what you said. And what I'm referring to really is the steps you took in your life to get this career and to maintain it. It's one thing to become famous, another thing to be able to write really good songs, but to then maintain that over decades. Wait, hold on one second.
I love dogs.
But then to have the strength of mind and spirit to be able to maintain that over that period of time. When I went back in time and took in all the steps you'd taken, the focus for me, just because I was fascinated by all the trials and tribulations and the ups and downs, the focus became to do something slightly different today, which I've never done before in the show's 3-year history, which is, in lieu of a completist trawl through your entire discography, I thought that we would focus on the endless 12-year road to you becoming an overnight success. And and everything that you dealt with while attempting to break into the music business. No wonder you seem so happy. There's not a lot of moody pictures of you that I've seen. You're always smiling. And no wonder. I mean, you banged your head against the brick wall for so many years and it became justified. Right? I mean, that really is.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there was no plan B, this is what I wanted to do. I mean, I started playing piano when I was 7, so really it goes back there. And then when I was 9 years old, my mother had the radio on the whole time, and I realized I could start playing tunes that I was hearing on the radio on the piano, and that was a big moment for me. And then they couldn't keep me away from the piano. It was like it got obsessive, 4 hours a day practicing, and then doing my own tunes. So but the thing is, when you're young, I really think it's important that you follow your instinct and your dreams and not be put off by anything that comes along to get in your way, to stop you doing that. I think that's the time to really establish your path. When I think back, I wasn't well connected. I didn't have lots of friends. I didn't know people, who were influential, but I just managed to drag them into my life through just sheer determination, and I think, artists starting out, that's what I'd like to say to them, always, just keep going, keep believing it, and work 3 times harder than anyone else. And you will see the results of that, because it's cause and effect, and I was not going to be deterred. I thought to myself, well, I was watching Top of the Pops, and I was going, oh, these people are great. I could do that. I can write songs like that. Yeah. And I sort of had this ridiculous belief that was true. But that's what you can do when you're young, isn't it? Before you get infected by doubts and fears that come along from powerful people in the music industry or whatever industry you're in.
Yeah. And by the way, some of the best music ever created comes out of doubt and fear. But at the same time, not everyone who has the steely resolve that you have has talent as well. So it's very dangerous to tell people who are completely devoid of talent to never stop until you achieve your dreams.
Well, the thing is, though, you see, my take on that is that if you still pursue what you think you really should be doing, right? And if you do that with real sincerity, it will take you in the direction you're supposed to go in. So if you don't really have the chops or whatever, or the talent, it will reveal to you what your talent actually is. And so you don't have to worry, just go, be single-minded about it, and it will take you to the right place.
So I have a few questions from some of your real diehard fans in your Facebook groups. So Phil Hintz from Chicago, from the Howard Jones International Fans Facebook group, wanted to ask, while we're talking about you hitting the ground running at age 7 on piano, what motivated you to take piano lessons in the first place? And did you have a choice of instruments to learn? And do you play any other instrument besides keyboards?
Well, my parents wanted me to learn the piano. They were both Welsh. They both sang. And the tradition that they came from in Wales is that you always had a song to sing when you visited people, or you always played the piano for somebody. That music was part of everyday life at that time when they were growing up in Wales. So they wanted to continue that tradition with me. And, to be honest, I think I was pretty musical, because I'd been brought up in this musical family. Although my parents weren't professionals, they would sing and they would do duets together, and we would go up to the local church. Not that I was, going there regularly, but when there was a choir on there, they would send me up there to have a listen. There was always music going on in the house. My mother listened to the radio all the time. And so for them, music was a part of life. It wasn't about necessarily performing in front of big audiences or doing that. It was just, it was a wonderful thing to do as part of your life. And they really encouraged me to do the piano. I mean, I have to say, it was really hard, because I had my first piano teacher was pretty grim and almost frightened me off playing. But somehow I managed to keep going. I mean, I didn't enjoy practicing because I wanted to be out playing football and cricket and, out with my friends. But, as I was saying before, I got to the age of 9, I'd managed to survive those early years. And I started to pick out tunes by ear, and then it just all changed for me. I could start playing songs that I heard in my head. So, yeah, it was great.
So when did you start writing songs then? Was it when you were 9?
I don't think so. Although my brothers and I formed like a band, although we didn't really have proper instruments. We literally had pots and pans as drums, and my brother Martin had a really ropey guitar, and we used to sing harmonies. We used to do Beach Boys harmonies.
Amazing.
The four of us, and we worked them out ourselves, and it was a very organic, natural thing to do. So it was
literally Beach Boys covers.
Yes, like things like On the Beach. That was the one I particularly remember. And one of our uncles who lived in Swansea in Wales bought a tape recorder, and nobody had a tape recorder in those days, but he rigged it up for us to actually record ourselves. And this is, when we were like, 11, 12, 13. So thinking back, actually, that's really significant because we got used to actually recording ourselves at that age. I don't know where those tapes are now. It must be quite hilarious to hear them. But it was like, you have to get it right because it's going down on tape. And that whole thing, I think, grows within you as you develop as a musician.
So is it fair to say that you truly got bit by the music bug when you made an appearance on Canadian TV singing Welsh songs?
Yeah, I think that was really is about that Welsh culture, and singing together with other people.
Was that your first big appearance in front of people?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was actually. Yeah, you're right.
So when they said action and the red light went on the camera, do you remember how you felt?
I honestly don't. I don't remember. I think that we were all quite nervous and scared of it all. But, because we're in a group and you're with your brothers and also another family we were really close to, I think the nerves were mitigated by that.
Right. Yeah. And then almost simultaneously, you had, somebody trying to dissuade you, which would, of course, this is, something that would pop up through the 70s, less so in the 80s, thank God. But your school music teacher tried to discourage you from taking music A-level, which I believe is British for basically taking it seriously or focusing on it.
Yeah, I mean, we're fast forwarding now to when I was back. We'd lived in Canada for 2 periods of time, and so we'd moved back to the UK, and I was still very, very, very committed to piano. I'd gone through all the Royal College of Music exams, and I'd passed my grade 8, which is the highest grade that they do before you go on to doing teaching exams. And, I assumed that I should study music at school and do music A-level. And I went to the head of music guy and said, I really wanted to take music A-level. And he was very negative about it. And I said, well, I've passed my grade 8 with merit. And he looked at me and didn't believe me. He didn't believe that I'd done it. And so he took me up to the Queen's Hall, which was just above the music department, and where was a grand piano, and said, play me something. So I played him one of my pieces, and he sort of almost fell over. But still, because I was, a bit of a rebel at school, and, I wasn't his sort of choice kind of music student, he wouldn't let me do music A-level. I can't believe it, really. But in a way, this was the best thing that could happen to me, because I became so determined to pursue it that I applied for music college up in Manchester, the Royal Northern College of Music, and managed to scrape in there. But it was all on my own efforts. I did the application for myself. I got myself up there to do the audition, and they said that I played Bach with a jazz swing, which I was really proud of. But fortunately, they did let me in. So that was a big part of my sort of musical development there as well.
And your first band was Warrior, which was a prog group circa 1971. So you're 16 years old. When you look back, did you start really, for real, trying to break into the music business in 1971 with Warrior? Yeah,
I mean, I realized playing with Warrior that it was like the most exciting thing you could possibly think of doing, I mean, we did some school concerts there. I mean, I don't know if they would allow that now, but in those days, we just about managed to do it. And, we had like all kinds of people turn up at the school, and Hell's Angels turned up on their bikes, and, it was crazy. And I had a Hohner Pianet keyboard, which is about the cheapest sort of electric keyboard you could possibly get. And I'd worked in a shop in town every Saturday to raise the money to buy it, on hire purchase. And I had a Vox AC30 that I used to run this Hohner Pianette through. And I used to be able to get a really distorted, gritty sound, and I used to have a wah-wah pedal to make it sound like more like Jimi Hendrix, who I was such a huge fan of. Yeah, so it was a time of experimenting with that and playing with other people on stage and realizing that it was such a buzz to do that, and people got so excited, and thought, oh yeah, I think this is something I'd like to do.
Well, it was Malcolm Will Pitcher on vocals, right? So you weren't actually singing, is that correct?
I actually wrote the vocal parts and wrote the music, but I didn't feel it was my role to be the singer because I was madly into Keith Emerson. So I just wanted to be like a keyboard player like him, the front man of the band, but keyboard player. So yeah, at that time I just didn't have confidence, or I didn't even think about being the singer. I just wanted to be the keyboard player.
But did you write all the songs?
Yeah, I did.
And what was the average length of each keyboard solo in every song?
Well, I mean, the songs would be sometimes 20 minutes long and have
That tells me this is a great band. Was it a great band?
Well, Will Pitcher on drums was great, and Malcolm, the singer who played flute as well, he was great. And yes, they were good. And they because they were older than me, they had resources, like they had jobs, so they could have access to places we could rehearse at their place of work. And so that was really great. And also their dad was a real organ fanatic and had a Leslie cabinet. And we used to borrow it from their front room and take it around to these horrible, grimy clubs and try and protect it from being scratched and beaten about. But it was really difficult. So, I mean, I always feel grateful to him for letting us do all that. But yeah, we used to take the Leslie it's like,
that's amazing.
From their front room, yeah.
Is it at all possible that a tape will surface at some point of Warrior? Are there any studio recordings or just live?
Yeah. I mean, the early version of Warrior, which was when I was still at school, we actually made an album and we had 100 vinyl copies pressed.
What's it called?
It doesn't have a title.
Perfect.
and it was in a white cover, so there was no... So you did your own artwork. That was the idea, that you put your own artwork on the cover.
That's awesome.
I've got a copy somewhere. And I think, there is a file that exists online that people can hear. Yeah, that was the very first recordings that I ever did. So
this is where things really kind of begin, because I know you were going to sleep every night thinking, this is it. Warrior is my meal ticket and Warrior is going to be huge. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing that, this is kind of where the road seriously begins, right?
Well, it was interesting because what happened was that we actually started to get, we did get interest from publishers and people used to come to the rehearsals, record industry people come to the rehearsals, and there was a lot of interest in signing us up because they saw something there. Then I got my place up at music college. So really that meant leaving home, leaving the area and actually, finishing the band really. So it was a choice I had at the time what to do. And I thought, well, I really need to develop my playing to the highest degree that I can, and to get into a college like that was an amazing good fortune. So yeah, I left. So Warrior really ended at that point. Yeah.
So you went in 1974 to Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, where you studied classical piano while playing in various bands. What were those bands? How many were there? And how good or bad were they from a 2024 Howard Jones perspective? Oh, hi, I'm Dave Gebroe. I threw my career as a licensed hearing instrument specialist in the trash, sold my house, and moved to the East Coast with my wife and 5-year-old son in order to focus on making the ultimate weekly podcast for music obsessives thrive. But weekly wasn't enough for me, so I bumped it up to 4 shows a week. Becoming a subscriber to Discograffiti's Patreon gives you access to hundreds of exclusive episodes. As a 2-show per week private, you get the weekly show by and for our Patreon family, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. As a 3-show-a-week lieutenant, you'll get early release, ad-free, extended director's cuts of the main show. They're the shows as they were intended to be heard. Plus, you'll gain access to half the Patreon archive and the upcoming Beach Boys Behind the Mirror companion episodes, which will feature dozens of special guests from within the Beach Boys camp talking about and rating their music. But as a 4-show-per-week major, you'll be drowning in a flood of must-hear binge listening, because I'll be bombarding you with episodes about super cool bands that are too subterranean for free Fridays. It's like going to music college, but with a tuition that makes all kinds of sense. Plus, our entire Patreon archive is yours. Discograffiti's Top 10, our Buried Treasure show, Rock Cousteau, our Slag Off show, Queasy Listening, and the Private Press with Paul Major. And all that for the price of only a cup of coffee a week. Times are tough, you say? Fret not, because there's a $1 tier. Or you could just join as a basic member and buy episodes piecemeal from our Patreon shop. Don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Check out patreon.com/discograffiti to find the tier that's right for you. Once again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti. So you went in 1974 to Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, where you studied classical piano while playing in various bands. What were those bands? How many were there? And how good or bad were they from a 2024 Howard Jones perspective?
Well, the bands were good because I was at music college and the people in the band were either in music college or had been to music college. So they were all good players. So the band that I played in at the time was a band called Bicycle Thieves. I don't think there's any recordings of them. And we used to rehearse in basements where people were renting rooms and stuff. But the thing was, because I got in with that group, they said, "Oh, look, we all do sessions on Radio Piccadilly," which was the local independent radio station in Manchester. And, it's from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. You play a song every 15 minutes and basically you can play whatever you like, but they preferred covers. In fact, they really wanted you to play covers. So because I knew all these people, I got this chance to do that. And I think it was like 3 nights a week. I would be doing that 2 till 6. And I got to, really develop my sort of recording things because the engineers there were up for doing experimental things and we were using tapes and tape echo, and although I was primarily playing the piano, I used to bring synths in and we used to do overdubs, and it was it was pretty exciting. I mean, I don't think it was great for the people listening because it was I think there was a few complaints coming in. They were fine when I was doing like a Stevie Wonder cover or something.
Well, because the session, from what I read, were supposed to be purely instrumental, but you couldn't resist singing here and then.
Yeah, that's right. I did a bit of singing, and it was all kind of it's funny, you get led into this thing, because of your passion for it all, things take you on a journey, and so you say yes to things, yes. And I'd have to sleep in a cupboard from 6 a.m. till 9 or something, and then go back into college, to do more like practice in the practice rooms or go to lessons and stuff. So it's pretty crazy and, really intense, but that's what you want when you're young, isn't it? You want it to be like full on.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was great.
And then at the time you were giving piano lessons as well, and that's how you met your wife, right?
Well, I'd given piano lessons before I went to music college, and one of the people was my wife, Jan, who, I got her playing to pass grade 5, which is pretty good. It was great. I used to enjoy teaching. When I left college and came home, that's when I really started to get serious about lessons because I needed money, coming in to fund all the equipment that I needed for this, the new idea that I had.
Let's talk about that new idea. And by the way, does it have anything to do with the compensation that you got from the fruit and veggie stand accident?
Well, that played a big role. But before that happened, I was working in a factory during the day. I was giving piano lessons at night, and I was doing work for a friend with their picture framing business. And literally it was like 24/7. It was like just being able to buy synthesizers and drum machines and stuff and develop this idea for a one-man band because, Warrior wasn't around anymore. That had finished when I'd gone to college. And so I didn't really know anybody to form a band with. So weirdly enough, one of the people I was teaching piano to was in a band with his family, and he lent me a drum machine. And it was a Bentley Rhythm Ace, which was really sort of a forerunner of the Roland brand. And so I started experimenting with like playing along with this drum machine, and it gave me ideas for how I could expand that into a one-man show with all these new synthesizers coming out and things you could buy in your local music store.
Right now we're talking, what, like 1978 or so?
Yeah, yes.
That's several years ahead of its time.
Well, I didn't know where I sat in the history of it all, but I just responded to what turned up in my environment. And This drum machine was there. And then one of the guys who I was teaching wanted me to teach him synthesizer. And he actually brought a Prophet 5. It was like an instrument that I could only dream of ever owning. And he would leave it with me so I could actually sort of mess with it at the house. It's like all these things turned up in my environment, pushing me in this direction. And in the end, in our front room at our tiny house in High Wycombe, I had like a 1,000-watt PA. I had like all these synths and drum machines. And, any spare time I'd be in there banging out tunes and stuff, driving the neighbors absolutely insane, which I really profoundly apologize for. It was just like, responding to what's turning up in your life, and like seeing it all as an opportunity to take things forward.
Talk to me about the importance of crossing paths with Bill Bryant around that time.
Yeah, well, Bill wrote some of the lyrics on that first album.
I mean, had you been introduced to Buddhism previous to Bill or no?
No. I hadn't been introduced to Buddhism. I always had an interest in Eastern philosophy, and I read a lot of books and, wanted to get to the bottom of understanding what life is all about and trying to create some meaning and have a kind of philosophy to live your life by. I was always looking for that. But, I hadn't met Buddhism by then.
And I know that, in starting around the early 90s, I believe, chanting became an integral part of your life. But are you still practicing Buddhist?
Oh yes, yeah. I've been practicing now for 31 years, and
that's great.
I've chanted every single day during that time, morning and evening, and studied the teachings. And I also, have a responsibility looking after people who chant here in Somerset. So it's been a massive part of my life and given me this sort of great grounding in how to stay positive when things go wrong, or the unexpected happens, and learning how to see everything as loaded with possibility, even the things that really hurt and the difficult things that come along, to find the silver lining in literally everything that comes into your life. And that's really helped me with my music and the way that I behave towards other people, and also, value my audience and respect my audience. It's been such a great philosophy for me to live by.
This seems like a perfect time for this question, which again is from one of your diehard fans. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but it's Paraic, and possibly that's Paraic. Paraic Elliott from Dublin, from the Howard Jones International Fans Facebook group, asks, did you ever get disheartened and think about giving up when you got so many record company rejections that conveyed disbelief that a one-man band could make it? Because, Howard, even though it says in your detailed timeline bio on your website, it says, I'm quoting now, Howard continued undeterred, but no human being is free from all doubt. So,
no.
In the dark night of the soul, what was that like for you?
It was that there's been so many moments where I felt on the edge of like, giving up. And funnily enough, it wasn't being rejected by all the record companies and publishers in those early days. I just felt like, that means that I'm waiting for the right person to really get it. And that did happen in the end. So I didn't feel deterred then, but it was when I came to the end of my deal with Warner Brothers. I'd done the 5-album deal with them and was totally expecting that they'd want to carry on and re-sign me, because I'd set up a studio at home. I was, able to record everything. I was just really set for I had so many albums I wanted to do, so many songs I wanted to write, and they didn't want to continue it, and they wanted and they didn't want to re-sign me. And what seemed like the worst possible thing for me, and I really had like 6 weeks, I think, of being very depressed and thinking, oh, it's the end now. I won't be able to do my music. I won't be able to get it out there. It's kind of the end of the road. I've had my 10 years.
Was that 1993?
Yeah. It was around that time that, yes, that's right. Yeah, you got it. But, I picked myself up and thought, actually, no, this is actually a great thing that's happened, because now I can set my own label. The internet was just burgeoning and flowering. So you could contact people with this new thing, the internet. It was a new era dawning, and I set up my own label. I made an album really quickly with tons of energy, and booked tours myself, and just like, right, okay, so this is now another era where I become an independent artist, and I'm going to make it great. I've still got my wonderful fans.
You also enlisted your parents to help you sell the copies of the records. I mean, and I'm saying that with so much love, because you're bringing it back from where the whole thing originated.
Yeah, that's right. It's right. It was back to the old days where it's a DIY cottage industry, but I had more resources then. I had a studio, and I had equipment, and I was really set up, and I realized that, and just started. And I mean, the 90s was not great for us 80s people either. It was like nobody really wanted to know about touring for you, and the 80s, we're past that, we're done with that, we're on to something new. And of course that's always going to be the case within contemporary music, but it was great. And it was almost like being I could do whatever I wanted. I could make whatever records I wanted to. I wasn't going to be under the pressure to write singles for radio, which didn't come from the record company, that came from me. I wanted to be on the radio, but, I had a really great time with the record company, and that's why it was a bit of a blow and a great sadness when it ended, because I hadn't had a terrible time with them. I had a great time. So, but no, this was a new era starting, and I just grasped it and ran with it, and made an album, got it out myself.
An early practitioner of this system that only years later became a lot more commonplace. And I got to ask, Detox is the name of your company, right?
Yeah.
So did Red Beat try to get signed to your label?
No, my brother's band, they were always, in a very different genre of music to me.
Just to explain to people who may not know, all your brothers except you, and I got to think that they tried to enlist you, right?
Well, by that time, I was doing my one-man band thing when they got together, and we never had that conversation.
Okay.
I was very worried that they were going to get signed before me because they were so good. They were so good. I mean, they sent me a tape of what they'd done. Oh, my God, it was so good. And I thought, they're going to get signed, and I'm going to be the wallflower, working away here, trying to do this. And they got very close to being signed, and they really should have been signed because their music was so good. Of course, then I recruited Martin and Roy to come on tour with me. So,
right.
Yeah.
Can't beat them, join them. Ever wondered what your favorite bands talk about after the gig on the long van ride between Reno and Salt Lake City? Do you miss having in-depth conversations about music with your closest friends, picking apart why some songs are good and why some miss the mark completely? Do you read every inch of the available liner notes and still shake a fist at the clouds yelling for more? Damn it, more? If any of this sounds familiar, 1001 Album Complaints is the podcast for you. Every week, musicians and close friends give irreverent but informed takes on a new classic album pulled randomly from the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. The hosts do extensive research telling the stories behind your favorite records and helping you better understand how songs, both great and terrible, were conceived and built from the ground up. In short, it's a deep dive with lots of laughs. So if you want to sound informed and funny when talking about music, I recommend you follow or subscribe to 1001 Album Complaints right now. Full disclosure, I've been on 1001 Album Complaints twice now, and both times I had a hell of a good time. Don't be fooled by the fun, offhanded interplay and the undeniable chemistry. It takes a lot of work to make this show appear as laid back and easy as it feels. An abundant amount of research goes behind every episode, and whether or not I agree with them, I have to respect the fact that the guys have always got an opinion, and they'll go down fighting trying to prove they're right. Seriously, check it out. I respect the hell out of these guys. Around 1980, your local following starts to increase, and you start gigging farther and farther away and seeing some success, right?
Yeah, it started very humbly. I remember the first gig I did, I had a Fender Rhodes piano with this little drum machine, and me, in a corner of a pub somewhere with nobody paying any attention whatsoever to me. But it was a start, so I realized, I'm going to have to raise my game here. I can't be sitting down. I've got to be standing up. I've got to have more keyboards around me. I've got to be able to give a bigger sound. I've got to have a louder PA. Yeah. I mean, my friend Will Pitcher, who had been in Warrior, had built me a PA, to play those little gigs. It was like every gig I did, I realized something that I needed to change and do. I need someone on stage with me to play out the characters and be a visual presence as well as me being there with the synths, and that was Jed,
Right.
And I needed to have lights, so I met some guys who were just starting a lighting company, and we had like 4 or I think it was 6 par cans at one gig, and for me it was like I was playing a stadium, I had lighting. So every show was like tried to develop and push it more, and gradually people were starting to get excited about it, and they started to come follow me around, and we responded to that by eventually, hiring coaches to take people from High Wycombe. Everyone would meet in the centre of Wycombe and come on the coach to wherever I was playing, around the London area and the home counties, we call them. And that eventually got to 6 coaches going up to London.
Wow.
So it was such an organic thing. And they were putting their faith in me as this crazy guy, with all the synths and these crazy songs. And it wasn't like a rock and roll band. This was something else, like you had a dancer, you had Jed on stage in these crazy costumes. But it really, inspired, people wanted to see me get signed and make proper records. I felt incredibly supported by those people, and it was amazing.
I mean, that had to have seen you through, because I know from 80 to 81, while you're pursuing agents, promoters, and record companies, the general response was a one-man band, that will never work. And so in the meantime, you've got a fleet of buses taking shows, proving them wrong. I mean, it must have gotten easier to deflect some of that criticism.
Well, I had no knowledge of how the music business worked or anything. I just was literally following my nose and having an idea and then just putting it into action. That's all I ever did.
Dream into action?
It was like, this is what I want to do. Let's find a way to do it, and we didn't have any money, we sold cassettes that I manufactured myself in my front room, from my live rig, and that helped a bit to pay for petrol and, getting us there. And because you never used to make any money from the shows, because, it was like, you're lucky to have a gig, right. That was the attitude. And that's fair enough. And I was very happy to have a gig.
So speaking of those early tapes, JAAP from the Netherlands,
yes,
Howard Jones International Fans Facebook group asks, some of us here are familiar with your old living room demos and other rare stuff from the early days. His favorite track is Loneliness, which was sung by your brother Roy. I think it's a track that could work in this day and age. Do you remember the track, and why was it never recorded?
I just about remember it. I mean, I remember the title. I couldn't sing it to you though. Okay. That's a real obscure one. Yep, that is. Yeah. I'd have to do a bit of research for that one.
So in 82, you met David Stops, who became your manager, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then things finally start happening.
Yeah. Yes, because David, because he ran the Friars Aylesbury Club, which was a very famous club that everyone played, and everyone was desperate, like people like me were desperate to play there. David was a kind of legend, And he gave me a couple of gigs at Friars, opening up for much bigger artists. Because David was connected, he was connected to the record companies and to managers, and because of the club that he ran, and he was very well, and still is, very well respected man. And so I thought, oh, David, he should be my manager. so I asked him if he'd be my manager, and he said no.
Of course.
And I'm like, like following form with everything else that happened to me. And then a couple of weeks later, he came back and changed his mind and said yes.
What changed his mind?
I don't know. I've never really asked him. Never really asked him that question.
God, oh man, I that's going to haunt me now, because I don't know if it was just that, but very, very quickly your life changed.
Yeah, I think there is, I do know the reason. I think I do, but I'd have to confirm it with David. So this is my take on it, right? This isn't David's, but he was managing a band called Marillion, who are still going now and who I'm really good friends with. And they decided, and David was managing them, and they decided that they didn't want David anymore. I don't know what reason for. And I think that's what it was. And so David's right. I'm gonna manage Howard Jones, and I'm gonna show you how to do it. So he was super motivated to make it happen for me, and did. I got signed very soon.
Revenge is a dish best served cold. And then, with only 2 days' notice, in May of '83, you secured the support slot on a China Crisis tour, right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And then that next month, you were signed off the back of a 24-track demo tape with New Song and What Is Love on it.
Yeah, so, I got a session on Radio 1 on the David Jensen show and played live, and that caused quite a stir. And Stiff Records, who, had Madness and Elvis Costello and people like that, a bit more indie artists, wanted to sign me. And then Paul Conroy, who was the CEO at the time, got an offer from Warner Brothers to, because Paul Conroy was the only record company person who'd come to see me and got it, and got the songs, got the way I was doing it. And his famous quote was, "We missed out on Depeche Mode. We're not going to miss out on this guy." Right. So Paul got this offer from Warner Brothers and decided to take it, because it was like, one of the major labels in the world, and he wanted to take me with him. So just as I was about to sign for Stiff, he said, "Don't sign it. I want you to come with me to Warner Brothers." And of course, that was another thing. When we're talking about things that happened to you, it would have been a different story if I'd signed with Stiff, maybe, But Paul took me to Warner Brothers, and I was with, Rob Dickens and Max Hole, these, incredible legends in the music industry. And they wanted to show everyone what they could do with new artists that they'd signed. And so they were just so fired up as well. So basically, it's a perfect storm then, because I'm fired up, David's fired up, record company are fired up, and it's got to work. And the first single, was got to number 3. And that's where the overnight success thing came in, but it was a joke. It was not overnight success, like you said.
Total joke. Because I remember in August '83 is when New Song came out. And by October, it hit number 3. And, over across the pond, I was 11 years old. And I remember seeing the video for the first time, and immediately, forget about earworm. This song lived in my head. I remember it was the song that I sang in the shower. Still to this day, it's my favorite song to sing in the shower. But that started when I was 11. And it started, my dad would wake the family up super early to go on road trips. And, that's one of my childhood memories. And so I'd be up at 3 a.m. and, I've been waiting for so long in the shower, washing my hair. And
I'm just getting my sounds together for the tour.
That is awesome. And I mean, I fell in love with what you were doing immediately. And I felt like, and I remember feeling this way, that I was discovering this brand new talent. And it's such a joke now looking at it because you'd been struggling longer than just about anyone on the planet.
Yeah, because I was 28 when I got signed. That's late. That's late, really, for the time. It was like, really, that's past it for a pop star. But I had to keep going. But the good thing is that all that time I was developing, so I was ready to take on what was coming, which was, I was totally fine with playing live, a long set. I was totally fine with traveling and plenty of songs for the first album. And the fact that it took so long was good because I was ready.
I'm curious now looking at it because Dream into Action feels like a maturation from Humans Lib. So I'm curious if you had like a George Harrison All Things Must Pass stockpile of songs that were also ready for Dream, or were those new?
I mean, there was some ideas that were in my head, but are not really formed songs. Okay. So really, Dream into Action was starting from scratch again, and I was writing that on the road because I was touring so much and traveling so much that I had a demo set up in my dressing room everywhere I went. So it was the only way that I could write the next album, which had to be good and had to follow in the footsteps of Humans Live.
Well, do you mind if we spend some time on Humans Lib?
Yeah, sure.
All right, that about does it. A full half-hour track-by-track discussion of Howard Jones' debut record, Humans Lib, can be found on the Discograffiti Patreon page, which can be accessed either by purchasing it outright for mere pennies or by subscribing at the Lieutenant tier. If you enjoyed this episode, please Venmo Gebroe. I repeat, Venmo Gebroe at David-Gebroe, Gebroe. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and my 5-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Venmo me a tip at David-Gebroe. Stay tuned, because next week we've got Jenny Toomey and Kristen Thompson of the Great Tsunami, just in time for Numero Group's release of their entire discography as the Loud Is As box set. Okay, here's the week up ahead. This Sunday, our weekly show within a show, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast, drops for our Patreon's private tier. These are real people with talent and a burning fire deep inside, just like you and I. Then, come Monday, the explosively creative force behind the Olivia Tremor Control Circulatory System et al., John Kieran Fernandez, joins me in a summit meeting exploring sobriety and the tricky vagarities of creativity in a bid to answer the age-old question, does inspiration go out to pasture along with getting loaded? You won't want to miss this very special 4 a.m. taping, which captured me minutes after rising and John minutes before sleep. And then on Wednesday, the Lieutenant tier get their early release, ad-free, super extended director's cut of Jenny Toomey and Kristen Thompson rating Tsunami. And then come Friday, the rest of you penny pinchers get to join in on the action. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Howard Jones, not to mention every single obstacle that ever stood in his way, Carice Yatter and Hired Gun Media, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, Jay Schultz, Cream Magazine, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator, and much, much more. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you in the loop. So now that it's done and you want more, another way to dive even deeper into the wonderful world of 1980s pop is to leap headfirst into Michael Imperioli Rates the Smiths, that's episodes 164 and 165, Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins, that's episode 163, my interview with Kula Shaker about the albums that shaped them, that's 139, De La Soul, that's 82, the Electric Light Orchestra, that's 34 and 35, Stevie Nicks, that's episode 21, Jen Pelly Rates the Raincoats, that's 15, and Cocteau Twins, number 3. And of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, November 8th, we're coming at you with Jenny Toomey and Kristen Thompson rating Tsunami. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti!